On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, we conclude our three-part series entitled The Pioneers, with a focus on Calgary, with the Cardinals and the Expos. Welcome to episode 45 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. This is the finale of our three-part trip down memory lane with a look back at the Pioneer League's days in our province. We started things off with the Lethbridge Expos, who arrived in 1975. 2 years later, the league expanded by two teams, adding the Medicine Hat A's and the Calgary Cardinals. Now, the story of the Cardinals is an interesting one. The man behind the effort was Russ Parker, who had been knocking on doors for a few years, trying to gauge interest on bringing affiliated baseball north of the border. He found a few roadblocks in the way, including hesitation from the Pioneer League's other owners and the need to find a willing Major League Baseball participant. Parker's dreams finally came to a reality in late 1976 when the league announced it would be expanding, setting in motion the work needed to open the gates to Foothill Stadium on June 25th, 1977. The Cardinals won that first game in wild fashion, giving up 6 runs in the top of the third inning, only to score 10 runs of their own in the bottom half en route to an 11-6 win over Idaho Falls. The Cardinals finished the season with a 34-36 record, good enough for fourth place in the league. They finished a little better in 1978, but the Cardinals unexpectedly left town. The Montreal Expos decided to set up shop in 1979, returning to Alberta after their first stint with Lethbridge in 1975-76, and they'd stay at Foothills for 6 years. In researching this project, I came to the realization that Parker's middle name should be persistent. Even on family vacations, he was stopping by the offices of MLB teams, trying to get that foot in the door for Calgary to bring in an affiliate. It was a labor of love, and I had the chance to chat with him earlier this week to talk about his efforts and what they mean to him now, all these years later. Russ, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Always happy to talk baseball.
Let's start off talking about your idea and involvement in trying to bring the Pioneer League to Calgary and to Alberta. From what I understand, this is something that was a long time coming, way before 1975 with Lethbridge, and then 1977 with Calgary and Medicine Hat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess sort of where I was coming from at that time was we had the Alberta Major Baseball League, and we worked hard to promote that league and develop into what we thought was a reasonably good caliber of baseball. And so you try and put on a good show there in that league and attract some fans. And you know what? It was just wasn't happening. It just was, people realized that it was, 3 Calgary teams at that time in the league, and that it was more house league, I guess, probably is how people were viewing it. And so personally, I just thought, there's got to be another caliber of baseball out there that perhaps Calgary could become part of. So, yeah, during that time was when I started exploring what else was available, and certainly the Pioneer League geographically made some sense to us up here, not so much to the other members of the Pioneer League, because it was all in Montana and Idaho. And I think they viewed going up that far up into Canada maybe was a little too far out of reach. But anyhow, that's sort of how it began.
From that standpoint, then, what were some of the stumbling blocks, or did you face any as you were trying to make your way and convince some teams that, hey, these are some viable markets north of the border?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, of course, is having an affiliation, because the Pioneer League was made up of, at that time, all the teams there. I guess it was six at that time, and they all had Major League affiliations. So the league might have been interested in adding some more franchises, but first of all, they had to convince the Major League organizations that the Pioneer League was a good league for their player development clubs. And so that was sort of all big part of it. Yes, thanks for coming, and we think Calgary's a beautiful city and all of that, It'd be nice to be up there eventually. They weren't ever saying no, but they said he was have to see which major league clubs are interested in coming. And if they are, then we'll obviously look at sites, and Calgary would certainly be one of those, and as would Medicine Hat.
Do you remember the moment where you went, this is actually going to become a reality? Like, this actually seems like something that is feasible?
To be honest with you, Joe, at one time I thought it's not going to happen. You make those trips down there, and you watch some baseball games and visit south of the border, and nothing wrong with going there, of course. But I was really had my doubts that it was ever going to happen. And lo and behold, a major league organization, a couple of them. I mean, Ralph Nellis, who was the league president at that time, and I always felt Ralph was definitely on my side of trying to get us into the league. So he was always making contacts with other clubs, because he was pretty proud of the Pioneer League, and he wanted it to be the best at that level. So he was reaching out, and anyway, so lo and behold, St. Louis called and said that we're interested in putting a team in that league.
When you got that call and the Cardinals were finally on board, talk about the process leading up to that opening day in 1977. How tough was it? Walk us through those processes.
Well, first of all, we had a ballpark up there called Foothills Park. It really wasn't much of a park. It had no box seats, basically bleacher-type seating, and, the dressing room facilities were not great. Small press box, God knows it. But anyway, so obviously the next step then was to meet with the city and try and work out a deal to lease that park. And if we could make certain improvements, which we had identified as what would be necessary. So, the city was good, pretty good at that time. We had, obviously working out a lease so that we had the concession and other things. So quite a bit had to be done to satisfy both the Major League Club and the Pioneer League, because they had to do redo it, what we call it, on the lights, take, I'm trying to think of the right word. Anyway, make sure that the lighting in the park was satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some upgrades there that were necessary to add some lights, and we bought some old box seats. When I say box seats with chairs and armrests from the Corral.
Right.
Well, the Corral was doing an upgrade on their seating, so we were able to make a deal to get some of those seats that they didn't feel they were required anymore, and we had them installed at the ballpark, which gave us sort of an elite section at the old Foothills Park, but something I thought was very necessary for people to get them to come to the ballpark and be comfortable while they were there. So that was all part of it, I guess, for sure.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on that June 25th, 1977, and do you remember standing in front of that crowd for opening day and finally seeing your dreams come to a reality finally?
Oh, yes, I do remember it very well. And, for sure. I felt pretty proud that we had a team now back in professional baseball league, and that we were outfitted in the St. Louis Cardinal uniforms, and the whole scene was pretty impressive, certainly at that time. And we had a packed house. I mean, it was a gorgeous day. So we had, I don't know, something like around 3,000 people that night jammed into that park. And halfway through the game, we got one of our cold fronts that moved in. So the last few innings wasn't very pleasant. But so I remember that in that opening night. But no, it was a good start. It felt pretty good for sure.
When you look back on that 77-78 connection with the Cardinals, what sticks out most for you?
Well, we had some players. Johnny Lewis was our field manager, and some of the Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinal brass, that would come in to do coaching with the young players, and that was pretty. I was pretty impressed with that. Just being around those kind of baseball people, and of course, we had lots of skilled players out there, and watching them do their workouts. it was pretty impressive for sure, and I think looked like it was be the best caliber of baseball that we'd ever had. I mean, certainly it was well above the Alberta Major Baseball League that we were trying to promote all those years.
Then you end up with the Expos in 1979, and they stick around for about 6 years there. What led to that change? And talk us through, having to deal with a change of affiliation. Were there any issues that you had to deal with leading up to 1979?
No, there really wasn't. What happened is, major league clubs will relocate certain franchises if there's sometimes it's a center that's closer to some of their other minor league teams that they'd like to sort of condense their minor league system. Excuse me. So St. Louis, I can't remember where they moved the team to. It had two summer league teams, and they may have just decided to go with one. Now I can't quite recall that, but anyhow, they informed us early that they were going to relocate, and so then it was up to the Pioneer League and myself to find another affiliation. And it didn't take long because Montreal had indicated in the past that they wouldn't mind putting a team in Calgary, and I had met many of the Montreal organizational people quite some time ago, and had a very good relationship with a person, for example, Jim Fanning. And so they didn't hesitate. When Calgary was available, they were eager to come.
Mm-hmm. And even when I was reading through it, I mean, having that connection with Lethbridge, for example, back in 75, 76, really probably opened up a few doors and made them willing and able to come back and have that Canadian connection as well. What do you remember most about the Pioneer League days in Calgary? What really stands out for you over that, about a decade or so that they were in town before you moved on and decided to bring the PCL to town?
Yeah. Well, overall, I mean, it was a good experience. I mean, we had a fairly consistent fan base, and it was good enough. Some nights you put on a promotion, you'd have a full house. So, no, it was good. It was a well-run league, for example. I mean, a bus league, which the minor leagues is any minor league in baseball outside of AAA, use bus as a means of transportation for getting to around in the league for scheduled games. So it was a well-run league in that regard. They always have some schedule issues, but it was pretty easy for really on our part to the league. The league was, I would say, was well run. It was us to promote and get people out to the ballpark and see some really exciting baseball. I mean, at that level of baseball, you see a lot of more errors than you would certainly at AAA. But the players at that time played hard because they were pretty excited that they were now playing professional baseball, and they were pretty impressed with starting their baseball careers off in a major league size city like Calgary. So I know the players, they were pretty impressed with everything when they got here.
Speaking of those players, any that really stick out, whether it be a personality side or an athletic side, that really impressed you the most?
Well, there were several. I mean, Big Jim Gott was our pitcher there the first year with the Cardinals, and he went on, had a major league career, actually pitched in Montreal, and he had a great arm, but Jim Gott was very capable of loading the bases or giving up a walk on 4 straight pitches and then striking out the next batter on 3. I mean, he was all over the place with his control, but I always remember him because you knew that he had a special arm, and probably with a little help with coaching and pitching coaching, that he was going to have a very good and long career, which he did. And we had Andres Galarraga, who, of course, put up some tremendous numbers with the Expos. When we had him, he was 17 years old. He was one of the youngest players signed, and so we watched his career. He was a big-time hitter. Couldn't hit the curveball when he was in Calgary, but when he did connect, they were massive home runs, and so that you could see there was great potential there. And he was a project for sure, but one of those players that went on and had a great career that started in Calgary.
Mm-hmm. And especially Galarraga is a great example, but I assume you had others who, I mean, this is their first stop in pro baseball. And so there's some who have not only, going away from home for the first time, but even in a new country, for example. Talk about some of those challenges and having to try to mold these young men even beyond the ballpark and having to introduce them to, things like the English language, for example.
Right. Oh, yeah, no. We had them staying, the Cardinals, initially at the university there, which worked out well. There was dorms available, and there was a cafeteria there. So certainly for all the Latin players that couldn't really speak any English, they could at least go through the cafeteria line and point to what they wanted to eat. We remember that. So there was that for sure, the language issues and players, from all over. I mean, we had a couple of kids from Hawaii on that team, of course, and Latin America, and some high kids that came in that were, all-American high school players. So it was quite a mix. And but I give, obviously St. Louis people, they had specific rules that the players had to abide by, and on and off the field. So we didn't have too many issues at all in dealing with the players individually.
1984 was the last year for the Expos and the Pioneer League in Calgary because in 1985 you guys brought the Cannons to town. Were there any ill feelings from the Expos surrounding that decision?
No. I mean, Montreal had no problem with it at all. I mean, they said all along that Calgary is really too big a city, too much of a major market for that caliber of ball, and so no, they were very supportive. Anything we can do to help, we would do. And they had another place for their development of their young players, so that wasn't an issue. But no, I mean that was that all happened so fast that I was very fortunate that Montreal were very supportive.
Final question for you, Russ. When you look back on the days of the Pioneer League and just in this province in general and some of the excitement that you saw not only in Calgary but in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge as well, what really sticks out to you? What are you most proud of from those years here in Alberta?
Well, I think it was very competitive, and obviously you wanted to win. And in our case, on the Canadian side here, I mean, we took great joy in being the best team on the Canadian side, for sure. But I think my recollection of the league clearly was that they were wonderful times. I mean, I kept in touch with a lot of the Pioneer League people for many years after that. Some came up to Calgary to see some games. It was close enough in AAA baseball, so we had a very good relationship. And exiting from the Pioneer League was not an issue at all. The entire league understood the situation, and basically it was all the best, and I know you'll do well, sort of thing. And so, but looking back at those years, it was a big step forward for us, and paved the way basically for the next level of baseball. And we were very fortunate that we were part of the baseball family. So that really helped too. We were established a team in Calgary, and Calgary was certainly a AAA market, and the people were very anxious to see Calgary succeed.
And I know a lot of people look back on the Cannons years with great fondness, but that's probably a story for another day. Loved sharing your stories when it came to the Pioneer League. Russ, thanks so much for joining us in the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Joe.
For more on the story of the Calgary Cardinals, you can head to albertadugoutstories.com. We want to thank Russ for joining us on the podcast, and big thanks to all of you for downloading and listening. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to leave us a rating and review, as those actions help us spread the word. We also hope you've enjoyed this special look back at the days of the Pioneer League in Alberta. Like I said to Russ, this may open a door for us to do more on baseball's past, whether it be the Alberta Major Baseball League, the Pacific Coast League, or any others. If you'd love to hear more about a specific era, drop us a line on any of our social media platforms, or you can email us, albertadugoutstories@gmail.com. Until next time, thanks again for all of your support of Alberta Dugout Stories.